Section 4 is all about blood, and blood isn't just red blood cells. It is defined as the connective tissue of cells that are suspended in a liquid, and this liquid is plasma. About 55% of our blood is plasma, and plasma is water, ions, proteins, dissolved gases, nutrients, waste, and some hormones. The other 45% are actual cells, including those red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, which I'll get more into those in just a moment. Cells develop from, or red blood cells develop from stem cells in bone marrow, including the white blood cells as well. Red blood cells, of course, have another name. Erythrocytes are also called blood cells. Oxygen is transported via the hemoglobin protein, and white blood cells have another name as well, leukocytes, and these are the types of cells that fight infection. Now, as I said a second ago, what are platelets? Platelets are the cell fragments which are very helpful for clotting blood. This diagram gives you a better idea of all the different constituents or parts that make up blood. So starting on the left, as I previously stated, plasma makes up 55% of what's known as blood. Now inside plasma we have water, which is an extremely important solvent, and we have lots of different kinds of ions. Ions in our bloodstream have another name, blood electrolytes. Things like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chlorine or chloride, and bicarbonate, these help to buffer, for the most part, our blood and keep it around that safe pH of around 7.4. Other things that are in our plasma proteins, and there's three main types of proteins. Albumin, which is helpful again for also buffering the pH. Fibrinogen, which is a protein for clotting, and then immunoglobulins, which is helpful for defense. So these are also known as antibodies of our plasma. And then, as I already said, other things in our plasma: nutrients, waste products, respiratory gases, and hormones. Now, looking on the right-hand side, the rest of our blood are actual cells, and that again is about 45%. There are 5 different kinds of white blood cells that are in our blood. One of them that I want to focus on are lymphocytes. And lymphocytes are the cells that give rise to B and T cells. These are like the top 2 immunity cells for our immune system. And these cells don't stay inside of our circulatory system. They actually end up as a part of our lymphatic system and also floating around in our interstitial fluid looking for trouble. Now, of the 5 different types of white blood cells, even though I just focused on the lymphocytes, please know that all white blood cells, usually abbreviated WBC, they have a general name. They're called leukocytes. So all white blood cells are called leukocytes. Specifically, lymphocytes, again, give rise to those B and T cells. The next thing that's in next kind of cell that make up your blood, platelets, cell fragments, helpful for blood clotting, and then those RBCs, or red blood cells, which help to transport oxygen throughout your circulatory system. This diagram shows you what happens when there's injury, like a cut or a scrape, so that way we don't keep bleeding and bleeding. So the first thing is blood clotting has another name, much like all this stuff, coagulation. So that's where the blood actually turns to a solid and there's clotting. The first protein that's helpful for coagulation is fibrinogen, and that's the protein that's going to trigger a domino effect of enzymes like thrombin, to help to seal up where there's damage and make fibers, like thin fibers. Other things that are helpful in sealing up that scrape or cut are platelets. Damaged cells can kind of help. And then things from plasma like calcium, vitamin K, help to form that clot in those fibers so that way somebody doesn't keep bleeding. There are different types of cardiovascular diseases, so here are a few of them. Atherosclerosis is a buildup of plaque deposits within the arteries. So plaque is fat that has built up, typically caused by cholesterol, which is a type of steroid that we do need, but we do not need it building up in our veins and arteries. A heart attack, also known as a myocardial infarction, is a blockage of one or more coronary arteries. So when we have a blockage taking place, there's going to be tissue that is deprived of oxygen. And when it's deprived of oxygen for too long, the tissue dies and potentially the heart stops, which is what a heart attack is. Another type is stroke, which is a rupture or blockage of arteries in the head. So if we ever have a thrombus is a blood clot. When that blood clot takes place, if it's in an artery and moves, it can cause damage to the brain and cause that artery to rupture, known as a stroke. The next kind is hypertension, and this is another name for high blood pressure. So having high blood pressure, unfortunately, promotes atherosclerosis and increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. So if you have high blood pressure, there's medications, a diet can be changed so that way it doesn't lead to those things that I just mentioned above. Numbers in terms of blood pressure, a systolic number of 140 and above, that's again where that heart is contracting, and diastolic of 90 and above when the body is at rest and the heart's at rest. Those are usually red flags for hypertension, which isn't good because of what it can lead to.